Hello and welcome back to the History Gals. Do you want to take us through what we're going to be sitting and talking about today, Erin?
Yeah, today we're actually going to be talking about better baby contests and their history with eugenics. It sounds like a very odd thing, and they were this little section in the progressive era of history in the United States that really took off for whatever reason.
So one of the themes that you will see come up in quite a few of our upcoming videos are baby and parent-related themes, as well as history gals. We are both history moms, and so I think it's something that struck both of our intrigues as we've been going through the baby phases of like, where does the history of different things come from?
Yes.
It's a fascinating and ever-learning time in our lives, so that's one of the things we're going to take you through today.
Yeah. So I've always had an interest in the history of eugenics. I was working on a project with another historian. They were going to do housing. They were going to do history of houses in Michigan, actually, that were related to eugenics. So I did a little help with some of the basic research and things like that. So we got that started, and then it just took off from there, and I learned about these weird things called better baby contests. What they literally were is they were contests that took place at state fairs primarily. Think like, state fairs today where you would see contests with chickens and cows and showing off your homespun goods. In this case, you would bring your babies, and a group of nurses and doctors and people in the not the history field, people in the medical field would rate these babies on growth, development, their looks and things like that, and basically the winner was like this perfect baby, and usually they won like a little bit of money back then. Usually they were featured in newspapers. A lot of times they were sponsored by milk companies and things like that.
I guess that leads me to ask the question of who was most likely putting their babies forward for this. Was this
white people?
Okay. Yep.
It was very
per or was it seen as kind of a wealthier, was it a needing to do it for money type of thing, or was it more of a like
I think it was
prestige?
It wasn't like a classist thing.
Okay.
It was very much a white demographic, and it was also very anti anyone who wasn't American, basically.
Immigrant.
Yeah, anti-immigrant. So it was white Americans, but it wasn't necessarily people who were, again, rich. It was just anyone who really liked the state fair and stuff like that.
Okay.
And these were just very well-known contests. We are from Indiana, or at least we live currently in the Indiana area, and the Indiana State Fair had the Better Baby Contest in the early 1900s. Actually, if you're familiar with the Indiana State Fair, it's where the Hook's drugstore is now, that took place at.
Okay. I think it's also important to acknowledge Indiana's history with the eugenics movement as a whole. If we're going to kind of talk about the relationship with the Better Baby contests.
It's not great.
No, it's really not. And to the extent that there is a marker outside the State House to the history of the eugenics movement in the state, because it was so prevalent.
Specifically on sterilization, the forced sterilization of both women and men who were deemed unfit in society to procreate, whether it was because they were in jail or whether they were in mental institutions. Often these were poor immigrant families, people, again, who had illnesses that they just were seen as they shouldn't be carrying on their genes.
So we've got this tying into the history of race, gender, disability.
Yes.
There's a whole cross-section here of issues that this kind of relates into.
Yes, and again, Indiana is at the forefront of this because it was the first state in the United States to enact a sterilization law, I believe in 1907, by Governor Hanley. I might be saying that wrong, but it was signed in like 1907.
I wish I could say I'm shocked that Indiana was...
It wasn't the only one, though. Don't feel too bad. It was not the only state. It was
leading the way.
Yes. So it was active for a few years. Then it was deemed unconstitutional by the Indiana state government. And then, again, there was a resurgence of eugenics, and it popped back up again up until, I want to say, like the 50s or 60s.
Okay.
Maybe even later. Again, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it was it was a very long time to where when they put that state marker in, there was a lady who had been sterilized who was the one who helped reveal the marker and talk about her experience with it.
Wow. Okay.
So very much current.
So in that vein, what kind of time period are we looking at for these better baby contests? When were they really prevalent?
The early 1900s is most prevalent before they started losing their interest.
So we're talking kind of pre-World War One.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, but maybe even late into the World War One, just before World War II kicked in, because obviously after World War II, eugenics, as like the idea of eugenics started going downhill because it started getting associated with Nazism and Germany and all that.
Yeah.
So that's when the idea of eugenics lost popularity, but the ideas behind them and that stuff still stayed.
Okay. So better baby contests themselves. The doctors and the nurses would be there, taking measurements, all of these things. What was the fallout of these contests? Like, what was the ongoing ramifications to society?
I would say their tie with eugenics is probably their biggest ramification because there is a positive of these contests. Yes, they were exclusionary to a lot of different groups, but part of the reason they created these contests was that to promote public cleanliness and promote better conditions for babies to grow in. So they often had classes that they had, and they handed out pamphlets at that time too that just showed about cleaning things, sterilizing things that weren't being done at the time to help these babies grow stronger and fitter. So you can balance it, like the good and the bad. Yes, it has really negative ties. We know that eugenics and sterilization and all that stuff is bad, but it did have some movement behind it of this health program.
Okay. I mean, we're talking about around the time things like antibiotics and things were starting to become more available, so cleanliness would have been
right.
a
And
really
the idea of
important
like
issue.
washing your bottles and washing
your hands
the
before
house.
making a bottle. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, interesting.
Yes,
interesting. So, do we see any connection then? So obviously you're talking about these better baby contests, right? And it strikes me as thinking like, I'm not going to name any company names in order to not, but there's a certain company that we think of when we think baby contests, right? There are a number of baby contests that still take place today. You send your baby's picture in and maybe they win or they end up on the TV or whatever. Are there any connections back to these better baby contests? Are we still seeing any of the effects of that in baby contests today, or are they very different?
I feel like those are more like cutesy babies versus, and I feel like they are more inclusive with different groups versus what they were back then. And this one, I feel like Better Baby Contest was definitely the cute aspect of how your eyes and nose and how they looked, but I think there was also an aspect of how are they growing, how's their head shape, all that stuff that would be developmentally based.
Okay, interesting.
That I feel like contests like pageant contests and like photo contests might not take into account.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like not to shame in any way, but I feel like they have their own issues. Yes. But at least they're not those issues.
Yes,
and that's a topic for a different video.
Issues. And not really a historical topic.
No, just judgment of babies, I mean. Although, I mean, don't we all ask ourselves if our babies are as cute as we think they are? Never ask yourself that question if you think they're cute just because you make them.
I just assume my baby is the cutest ever.
Me too. But then we made them, so. Okay. Thank you so much for filling me in on this Better Baby Contest.
Yes.
Situation.
The fun thing is, it didn't take off as much, but related to the eugenics movement and the Better Baby Contest, there was also this thing called Fitter Family Contest. Where the whole family were involved in like seeing how fit, and they didn't take off as much as babies. I'm assuming because babies are cute.
Imagine like the presidential fitness test that you've got the whole family going out for a run together and being like tested.
Yeah. Yes, I didn't get into as deep studying that, so I don't know all the aspects for that, but I feel like that one is definitely more eugenics and genetic tied than the baby ones are.
Lovely.
But yeah, thank you. And if you have any more interesting facts about eugenics or you want some source material, just feel free to check our descriptions below.
Or perhaps you know someone who was in a Bear Baby contest or want to share any historical stories with us, feel free to drop that down below and ask us any questions that you have. As always, we will leave our source material in the bio boxes down below, and you're always welcome to ask us any questions that you have.
Yes.
Thank you for sitting with the History Gals today.
Like and subscribe our stuff.
Have a wonderful day.